Veterans, DKB employees, everybody watching, welcome to Veteran Lang here on YouTube. Hey, glad you're here. Really glad you're here. I hope everyone's doing well. I realize I quit checking in on those New Year's resolutions, and now this year has escaped me. So I do hope that those went well for you. I think mine had some progress and had some slips, and they're off the rails. But hey, here we are. Can you believe it? Yeah, almost a whole another year. Hey, I'm your friendly VA accredited Mike Lang here to talk about VA benefits. The purpose here is education, everyone here. I am here and available if you want to talk about your VA case. If you live in the Arizona area or New Mexico area, we can talk about some other legal issues there. But otherwise, VA is nationwide. We can help you no matter where you live. So feel free to reach out to us, veteranlang.com or langslegal.com. We run two different pages, so we can dedicate one page mainly to VA information and a new educational platform that we're running. And we got the Langs Legal too that will cross over, but it's really there to kind of keep that focus on the other state ran stuff as well. So check us out if you want, but don't forget there's other VA accredited attorneys and agents and VSOs out there that are there to help you as well, veterans, if you choose representation or you're looking for that additional assistance. What do we got today? Well, we're going to talk about that VA Disability Benefits Questionnaire, that DBQ. Let's talk about some of its purpose, its history, and its problems. Veterans, if you filed a VA disability claim, I'm pretty sure you've heard of this term, DBQ. Maybe a VA examiner completed one during your CMP exam, your VA exam. Maybe your private doctor completed one. Or perhaps someone told you that obtaining a private DBQ would guarantee a particular disability rating. But whatever exactly is the reason, we are here to ask again what exactly is the DBQ and why did VA create these forms, along with why have DBQs generated both praise and controversy. So in this video, we're going to discuss the purpose and the history of the DBQ, some of the problems associated with these DBQs, and most importantly, what veterans need to understand before relying on one. So don't forget, again, this is only education. General education information is not legal advice concerning any individual claim. For the facts of your claim are your facts alone, veterans. They may vary significantly from your neighbor, from your friend, from your buddy, from your brother, from your sister. So we don't want to try to give advice on what we don't know or the facts that we're unaware of. At least on this channel, but give us a call again if you want to talk about your claim individually. So let's get down to it. What is a DBQ? DBQ stands for, as I mentioned, Disability Benefits Questionnaire. DBQ is a standardized medical form designed to collect the medical information VA needs to evaluate a claimed disability. The definition is important. A DBQ is primarily an evidence-gathering tool. It is not a claim form. It is not a rating decision. It is not a rating decision. And the mere submission of a DBQ does not guarantee service connection or a particular evaluation. The forms are generally organized by body system or medical condition. There are DBQs addressing conditions involving the back, the knees, peripheral nerves, headaches, respiratory disorders, mental disorders, and many other disabilities. Each DBQ is going to ask the examiner to document information such as the veteran's diagnosis, medical history, current symptoms, objective examination findings, diagnostic testing, functional impairment, and in some circumstances, the medical opinion or explanation requested by VA. The questions are not random. They're generally designed to obtain findings that correspond to the certain criteria that is in VA's scheduler for rating disabilities found in 38 CFR Part 4. DBQ findings generally correspond, again, to VA rating criteria under 38 CFR Part 4. And I think that's crucial here in our talk because, again, this is an evidence-based tool for the purposes of lining everything up with the legal side and may not quite fit the medical side as smoothly when it comes to private healthcare. So for example, an DBQ asks about range of motion, painful motion, instability, flare-ups, repeated use, and functional limitations, because those findings may affect the evaluation VA assigns. Mental disorder DBQ asks about symptoms and the resulting level of occupational and social impairment, because, again, those matters are central to the VA's mental health rating criteria. In other words, the DBQ translates a medical examination or medical information into a format that a VA claims processor can use. VA describes DBQs as forms that collect the medical information necessary to process disability claims. Public DBQs also allow veterans to submit medical evidence prepared by their own healthcare providers. So why did we create these DBQs? Or why did VA create these DBQs? Well, before DBQs, compensation examinations were documented through various worksheets and narrative reports. The problem with a purely narrative medical report is that the doctor may provide a great deal of useful medical information, but still omit the particular findings required under VA's rating scheduler. Boy, did we not see that a whole lot when I worked in the VA system early on. These exams would come back as just paragraphs, not in the DBQ format they are today, and we would have to dig through those paragraphs and make sense, heads or tails, as you may say, of what was being said and how it corresponded with the regulations in the CFR Part 4 there. So here, let me give you an example. A doctor might write that a veteran has severe back pain and limited motion, but VA may need the actual range of motion measurements, information about flare-ups and neurological abnormalities, and the functional efforts of repeated use. So if critical information was missing or is missing, VA may have to request the clarification or order another examination. And that means more development and more expense and more delay. So DBQs were intended to reduce the problem through standardization. So keep that in mind. Again, they were designed to tell examiners what information VA needs, not necessarily to tell examiners what they normally do for the healthcare side of stuff in the private or civilian world outside of the VA or their standard practices. It was also there to produce more consistent examination reports. It's supposed to reduce missing medical findings, help claims processors locate relevant information, allow private providers to submit evidence in a VA compatible format, and, well, speed up disability decisions. You know, the idea was straightforward. Excuse me. The idea was straightforward. If VA asks the same relevant questions in the same organized format, a claims processor should be able to review the evidence more efficiently and accurately. But as we'll discuss, standardization has advantages and limitations. So let's get into the brief history of the DBQ before we jump all that way into some of the problems. VA began implementing DBQs, I want to say roughly 2010, maybe late 2010, as part of a broader effort to speed the processing of disability compensation pension claims. The initial public release involved 3 questionnaires addressing certain conditions. So during 2011, VA continued the administrative approval process for additional groups of DBQs. Federal Register notices describe the forms as a new information collection intended to obtain medical evidence from a claimant's treating physician that VA needed to adjudicate the claim. Then in 2012, probably roughly around March, VA announced the release of 68 additional forms. That brought the total number of DBQs to 71. At the time, VA said the questionnaires would capture the important medical information needed to accurately evaluate claims, place the relevant findings in one form, and reduce processing time and improve quality. VA also emphasized the veterans could have private physicians complete the same types of forms used by VA doctors. Now, this was released in VA's announcement back in 2012. Now, this created two general categories of DBQs. First, they're internal DBQs, used during examinations performed by VA or VA contracted examiners. And then the second is the public DBQs that veterans may ask their own non-VA healthcare providers to complete. The distinction matters because VA and contract examiners generally receive VA-specific training and are subject to examination quality procedures. A private provider completing a public DBQ may be an excellent physician, but may have little or no experience with VA terminology, regulations, or examination requirements. So concerns about the program rose relatively early. VA's Office of Inspector General issued reports in 2012 and 2016 identifying weaknesses in the VA's internal controls over public DBQs, including problems with tracking and verification and the risk of fraudulent submissions. So in February of 2020, the Inspector General also reported that some public DBQs completed through telehealth had been improperly used to decide claims. Now, in April of 2020, VA removed the public DBQs from its website. VA explained that the forms were undergoing modernization, that its internal examination capacity had increased, and that removing the forms would help address the inherent risk of fraud. Congress later intervened. The law required VA to make DBQs available in a central location on its public website. In March of 2021, VA restored 69 of the public DBQs. And today, veterans can again download public DBQs and submit forms completed by their healthcare providers. The system is still evolving. Senator Elizabeth Dole 21st Century Veterans Healthcare and Benefits Improvement Act, enacted in 2025, requires additional modernization of DBQ transmission. VA has proposed a secured web portal through which authorized non-VA providers could submit machine-readable DBQ information directly to VA. And VA expects that project to improve data accuracy, provider verification, processing efficiency, and fraud prevention. But its implementation plan describes the project as being developed in phases. So, what's the benefits of a DBQ? A properly completed DBQ can extremely be useful. First, it can organize complicated medical evidence. Instead of requiring a claims processor to search through hundreds of pages of treatment records, DBQ may place the relevant diagnosis, symptoms, test results, and functional limitations into a single document. Keeping in mind, they're still responsible to know what's in those other records. Second, a DBQ can help identify whether the evidence addresses the applicable rating criteria. And third, a private DBQ may allow a long-time treating provider to explain a veteran's disability. VA itself recognizes that private providers can offer valuable evidence because they may be familiar with the veteran's medical history over an extended period. And lastly, fourth, a sufficiently complete DBQ may reduce the need for additional development if utilized properly. But the keywords are properly completed and sufficiently completed. A DBQ is only as reliable as the examination, testing, record review, medical reasoning, and information behind it. So a DBQ does not automatically establish service connection. I want to make sure that's clear. One of the most common misunderstandings is that a completed DBQ automatically proves the entire claim. It does not. Direct service connection ordinarily involves, again, those three basic elements that we always talk about. And those three basic elements of service connection are a current disability, an in-service event, injury, disease, and then the nexus, a relationship, a link between the current disability and the military service, a link between past and present. A DBQ may establish the diagnosis and document the current severity of the condition. But depending on the form and the questions presented, it may not adequately address the in-service event or provide a reasoned nexus opinion. A DBQ prepared for an increased rating claim may thoroughly document current symptoms without establishing when those symptoms became worse as well. And this is why veterans must understand the issue VA is deciding. Is this dispute over a diagnosis? Is that about service connection? Is it about secondary service connection? Is it about a current percentage? Is it about the effective date? Or is it about entitlement to something else like individual unemployability? A DBQ that answers the wrong question may be medically accurate but legally insufficient to resolve the claim. And now this is on both sides, both private and VA. The DBQs provided checkboxes, and we ultimately have a checkbox problem. The standardization of one of the DBQ's greatest strengths, again, is that checkbox, but it can also be one of the greatest weaknesses. A checkbox makes information easy to find, but a checkbox may oversimplify a complicated medical condition. A veteran's symptoms may fluctuate. The examination may occur on a relatively good day. The veteran may experience severe flare-ups that are not directly observable during the appointment. Some conditions, say migraines, mental health disorders, or musculoskeletal disabilities, and other episodic illnesses, cannot always be fully understood from a short snapshot. The narrative sections of the DBQ therefore matter, along with all the other evidence in the file. An examiner should not merely check boxes. When appropriate, the examiner should explain the veteran's medical history, the frequency, severity, and duration of symptoms, what happens during flare-ups, the effect of repeated use, the functional impact on employment and daily activities, the evidence supporting the findings, and the reasoning behind any medical opinion. So again, I want to go through that. The narrative sections of the DBQs matter, and not just the check boxes. Because an examiner should not merely check those boxes. When appropriate, the examiner should explain the veteran's medical history, the frequency, severity, and duration of symptoms, what happens during flare-ups, the effect of repeated use, the functional impact on employment and daily activities, the evidence supporting the findings, and the reasoning behind any medical opinion. A DBQ with numerous checkboxes but no meaningful explanation may create the appearance of completeness without actually providing an adequate medical foundation. Now, we also have to caution here, as VA tends to only review certain checkboxes and not the entire DBQ. Understand there is so much more information required in that DBQ in order to help summarize the evidence. But even so, I will always highlight that the other evidence in the file is just as important. And rules provide direction in weighing and adding probative value to that evidence and analyzing it in the decisions as well. Now, private providers may not understand the VA requirements. This could be an issue. A private healthcare provider may be highly qualified to diagnose and treat a condition, but they're unfamiliar with the VA's disability system. We got to make law and medical worlds talk. And that's not always that easy. Treatment and disability evaluations have different purposes. A treating physician focuses on diagnosing the patient, reducing symptoms, and improving health. A disability examiner must document specific findings needed to answer legal and rating questions. The difference can result in common omissions, such as failure to use the current version of the DBQ, failure to review relevant records, missing range of motion requirements, no discussion of flare-ups or repeated use, missing diagnostic tests, an unanswered functional impact section, failure to provide the provider's credentials or license information, an opinion stated without supporting medical reasoning, or a conclusion that does not address the correct legal theory. So some DBQs also contain provider qualification or specialty requirements, and a provider who is qualified to treat a patient may not necessarily satisfy the specific requirements for a particular VA disability examination. The 2022 VA Inspector General review had explained that VA and contract providers are vetted, trained, and subject to review. Non-VA providers completing public DBQs generally are not required to undergo the same VA training or quality review process. Now, this does not mean that a private DBQ is inferior. It means VA will evaluate whether the provider was qualified and whether the report contains sufficient, credible, and properly supported information. Now, I'd even take it further and say that even though there is some sort of training provided to the VA and contract providers, and that they are vetted, and that there is a subject to review, they are not free of error and their DBQs. Their DBQs may actually not weigh as much as a private DBQ, even with all that training, because the training may be lacking, may be incorrect, or that contracted or VA examiner has also failed to provide those legal requirements inside that DBQ. Now, VA may still order an examination even if you submit a DBQ, veterans. Another common misconception is that submitting a private DBQ prevents VA from scheduling a C&P exam. It doesn't always, even though in most cases I would probably argue it should. A complete and adequate private DBQ may make another examination unnecessary, but VA may still seek an additional examination or medical opinion if it determines that more information is needed to decide the claim. Legally determined that more information is needed to decide the claim. VA's public DBQ page specifically advises veterans that in most instances they are entitled to no-cost VA disability examination. It also states that VA may require an additional examination and that the veteran must report if one is scheduled. That's just what the page says. I would speak with your representatives, veterans, on that one if you have any questions or concerns there. Do not assume that submitting a private DBQ cancels a scheduled C&P exam or a VA exam. If VA schedules an examination, do not simply fail to appear because you believe your private DBQ should be sufficient. A failure to report can have serious consequences under VA regulations. Instead, determine why VA ordered the examination, whether VA believes the existing evidence is incomplete, inconsistent, outdated, or otherwise insufficient. Because you may find that they can't answer any of those questions and that the VA exam is actually improper. But don't make the assumption. Understand why the other VA exam is ordered, because it may be necessary. Again, it's a good opportunity to have a representative on your side. Let's talk about cost and access. VA generally does not pay or reimburse a veteran for the expense of obtaining a private DBQ. Some training providers will complete one as part of the veteran's care. Others may decline because the form is lengthy, because the provider lacks familiarity with the VA requirements, or because completing disability paperwork is outside the provider's normal practice. Other veterans may pay for an independent examination. This creates an access problem. Not every veteran can afford private evaluation, specialized testing, or a professional who understands VA disability law. VA has warned veterans about DBQ-related fraud schemes. A legitimate medical professional should provide an independent medical assessment and not manufacture findings designed to reach a predetermined rating. Some of these individuals are out there who veterans are charging you to just check the boxes and submit stuff. Be careful. Be careful. Buyer beware, I suppose, there. Now, because there are these challenges when it comes to the private sector trying to fill out these DBQs, especially your primary care physicians, it's not necessarily a bad thing to seek out a provider or an independent examination who understands the practices of the VA. I would say this is where, again, a representative could be helpful. As I know here at our firm, we vet those individuals with extreme scrutiny and ensure that they understand the rules, the regulations. They review the entire C file, all the evidence that you have provided veterans in order to make the sound judgment and to provide proper medical information when the VA can't get it right themselves. But the problem again is that comes with a cost, and it's really not fair to you veterans, but it is the problem that we are facing at the moment. What about quality problems? They're not just limited to private DBQs. It'd be a mistake to discuss DBQ problems as though they only exist in the private sector. Then I've kind of hinted away from the idea that they do. But VA and VA contract examinations can also be incomplete or inadequate, and we see it all the time back here. Pretty much everybody that comes to us, there's always an incomplete or inadequate issue with every contract exam or VA exam. A DBQ may contain internal inconsistencies. Examiner may overlook favorable medical records, misunderstand the veteran's history, fail to address lay statements, provide unsupported conclusions, or inadequately evaluate functional loss. The Government Accountability Office reported in 2024 that approximately 93% of VA disability examinations were being performed by contractors as of July 2024. The Accountability Office found that VA had quality control procedures, but identified weaknesses in verifying whether contractors completed corrective actions and whether those actions improved examination quality over time. So low quality examinations can require rework, delay claims, increased government cost, and most importantly, lead to incorrect decisions. See it all the time. The important question is therefore not simply whether the DBQ came from a VA examiner or a private examiner. The ultimate question is whether the examination is competent, credible, complete, internally consistent, based on an accurate history, and whether it's supported by adequate reasoning. Let's talk about that fraud prevention versus fair access. Public DBQs present VA with a difficult policy problem. On one side, veterans should be able to submit medical evidence from providers that they know and they trust. That can give veterans greater control over the development of their claims and provide VA with evidence from doctors who understand the veteran's medical history. But on the other side, VA must protect the disability system from false or manipulated medical evidence. A January 2024 Inspector General report found that VA lacked effective controls to mitigate fraud risks involving public DBQs. In a statistical estimate based on the claims it reviewed, the Inspector General reported that approximately 69% of the relevant claims had one or more fraud risk indicators. But that finding requires an important clarification. A fraud risk indicator is not proof that a veteran or provider committed fraud. It indicates that additional verification may have been appropriate. The challenge is to detect truly fraudulent submissions without unfairly treating every DBQ or every veteran who obtains one as suspicious. That tension between access and verification has existed throughout the DBQ program's history, and it is one reason VA is working toward a secure provider portal with credential verification and machine-readable submissions. This is a problem that we do run into. As there are potential fraudulent issues, VA does appear to ignore all private evidence when they're not required to by law and should not be by law, and ultimately are denying claims underneath their own inadequate medical opinions. So what should veterans do? If you intend to submit a private DBQ, consider these following steps. First, use the current version of the form from the VA's official website. I'll put that in the description of this video so you have it. Second, make sure that the appropriate qualified healthcare professional completes it. Third, provide the examiner with relevant treatment records, prior examinations, diagnostic testing, and an accurate medical history. Fourth, make sure every applicable section is answered. If a question cannot be answered, the provider should explain why. Fifth, review the completed form for obvious omissions, not to influence the medical findings, but to make sure the provider signed and dated the form and included the required identifying credential and license information. Sixth, determine whether the claim also requires a separate medical nexus opinion. Do not assume that a severity DBQ automatically answers the service-connected questions. Seventh, preserve a complete copy of everything submitted. And finally, if VA schedules a CMP exam or a VA exam, do not ignore it. Determine what VA is requesting and respond appropriately. So in conclusion, the DBQ was created to solve a real problem. VA needed a standardized way to collect and extract the medical evidence required to decide disability claims. The forms were intended to improve consistency, reduce missing evidence, and allow private providers to participate in the process and help VA issue decisions more quickly. Now, those goals remain worthwhile, but a form cannot replace medical judgment. It cannot turn an incomplete examination into a complete one. It cannot transform an unsupported conclusion into a persuasive medical opinion, and it cannot resolve every legal issue involved in a disability claim. The DBQ is only a tool. When the correct form is completed by a qualified examiner based on accurate history and adequate examination with the necessary testing and medical reasoning, it can be a powerful piece of evidence. But when it's incomplete, inaccurate, internally inconsistent, unsupported, or directed toward the wrong issue, it can delay the claim or contribute to an incorrect decision. Now, this is the case whether it's VA-generated or non-VA generated. So don't just focus on whether the DBQ exists. Focus on what the DBQ actually proves. That is my DBQ talk for you, everyone, today. The DBQs are out there. Utilize them as that tool that they're meant to be, but understand them, understand the surrounding problems. And VA, don't just discount them because they're private. You still have other rules and regulations that you must follow in order to accept those. Well, everyone, I can't wait to hear what else you'd like to know about. Throw stuff in the comments for me. Let me know how you feel about DBQs. What challenges have you had? What's your thoughts? Let's open up the discussion. My education can only grow along with yours when we discuss everything amongst each other and we share the knowledge that we all carry with us. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you in the next video.